Like the yeah. So like I just held my tongue last week was not clear to me is what the use case is or what the use is of this information once we have it, this categorization. Because
I think
there are a lot, and I don't know which ones
I think
are
there's many
priority.
things,
Yeah.
and that's a perfectly valid question to ask. Here's what I see as the goals of this exercise. One is to know what tools exist, so that we're able to offer services based on our understanding of the ecosystem. It's like we know what's there, and we can use whatever we've built plus what others have built, because we understand the strengths and weaknesses of different tools, and we know which ones are useful for a specific use case. That's one aspect. I think that's a small aspect, but it's a real one. The real thing is we want to identify holes in the landscape so that we're able to make tailor offerings to go beyond the existing limitations.
Yeah, and those are the two use cases that I feel how do I say this? Like, I feel like they're really advanced use cases. Like it's a kind of they're package selection type things. What do you call this type of solutions architect type
Yes.
activities? And for that sort of thing, I don't feel like categorization is enough. It's like you really have to have a deep understanding of each of the tools and them being available. And getting people to tag stuff isn't going to get us that knowledge, right? It's a first lookup type thing. And that's where like I started getting into, I'm started wondering about, maybe our tags are a little too detailed and complex for a quick lookup, right? Of just categorizations, and yet insufficient for like being a solutions architect with this. It might be a good starting point for trying stuff out if you're going to do that sort of thing. So
I understand.
yeah, so that's what I've been pondering, and it's been hard for me to contribute because I haven't resolved that.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Like let me put it a different way. Like one main thing that's missing from this is like, does this actually solve the problem they were trying to do? Is this a package you would actually recommend somebody using, right? If we were doing a survey of types of UI interface that have a tree representation, that kind of categorization would be interesting. Let's see what different ways people have represented a tree of information, but it's different.
See, okay, for example, saying this does or doesn't allow graph non-tree links. Like it's one of my main problems at Kumu. If I want to describe, say, evaluation matrix for different solutions, I cannot compare solutions in a tree. I cannot say this solution is better than this one on a criterion and have that link to both solutions, or make a ranking of solutions based on a given criterion, a tier ranking, maybe if some are comparable. That is not something I can do with the tree-based solution. So saying something is a tree-based solution means this class of problem is not solvable with that solution. I think for me, that's useful, for what it's worth. And this is why I think the time I spent on goals, I'm really happy with. Saying, what is this about? And what does this goal have to do in terms of the focus of the application, right? If you're doing group mapping, you're interested in curated maps. If you're doing external memory, you're interested in ease of input and findability. If you're working on group alignment, I mean, I think this, I'm really happy with that work.
Right.
Is that useful for a solutions architect? I don't know. I think it's
Well,
useful.
what I think is it is useful for you working as a solutions architect, that you've worked through all this and figured out a lot of these things, right? I don't know if as a document it would help any of us. I think you've probably done some good work and some good thinking on this, and I'd like to see what you've come up with, or what you've learned from this exercise. So
Right. I don't know if I can explain what I've learned other than the document itself, but it's interesting. But it's been trying to see what are these things trying to do, and trying to map out what's this territory that we're staking up to a point, right?
Right.
We're making a tool for thought, for collective thought. Part of it is group alignment, group mapping, really. It's the main thing. And augmented validation is obviously one of our key goals. And that is there also, immune system versus disinformation.
Well, let's go through the document in the order.
Right.
And
I have, metadata is not the right title, but stuff about what the software is. Like, for example, is it self-contained, extensible? Is it a plugin of an extensible software? Is it software that is programmable, so you can really augment it with with code? Or is it data format protocol? So what is the thing in the first place? Does it live on a website, on desktop, on mobile, on the distributed web? And this, I expect, would be, more than one of the above in many cases. License is obvious. We had that. Scale, we had that. This, I'm not making it. This is just taken from the other list. Same with the institution. Audience is something I came up with recently. It's more about kind of the training. Is it addressing, again, there can be more than one response here. It can have different audiences. But is it mostly for contributors, like people who just enter text? Curators, people who are interested in working on structuration of unstructured contributions. The knowledge workers, those would be themselves inputting new data as structured, more structured data. So they're continuously self-structuring, but it's not necessarily formal in the sense of formal logic. And knowledge engineers, formal logic, ontology, yada, yada, yada. So, for example, society library work is, they're kind of intermediate. They're mostly curators, but the formality level is a bit between workers and engineers.
Yeah, you've kind of mixed.
Yeah, I'm mixing. Are you working on
focus of the work with the expertise required to
Yeah, and that may not, I'm aware of that. That may be an issue, but maybe we should separate them. The question is there, we had another thing before, which I removed, which is, do we allow unstructured data entry or not? And maybe I should resume that, right? And then, is there progressive formalization? And that means, yes, there's unstructured data entry. But I think having the notion of who's the main audience is important. Like, what's the level of expertise of the main audience? And again, there can be many replies.
But there's two different sides to that as well, right? Because like society library papers or whatever, the audience is anybody. The contributors is a select group of somewhat skilled.
Good point. Here I meant I meant the intended, who's going to be using the tool. It's not the same as viewers of the tool product. But that's a very good point. Intended users may be a better title here. Okay, maybe I'll remove. Yeah. I'm tempted to just exchange those two. Because the reality is curators need more knowledge than knowledge workers because they're more worried about structure than basic knowledge workers who are okay if it's readable only by themselves. They're structuring, but they're structuring only up to a point. But yeah, I need to reintroduce
Yeah, I think it, like, although there's lots of, I mean, there's an infinite number of possible user types, right? Actors. It can be cleanly split into the producers, the contributors, and the consumers, right?
General public. Say what you said again. I think it is covered.
Although there's like an infinite possibility of actors on a system, right?
Yep.
I think we can cleanly categorize by contributors and consumers, right? And in cases where it's an individual tool to help you think, they're one and the same. In other cases,
no, yeah.
You know, or fully crowdsourced with no special skills, it's also one and the same. But if there's any divergence between the two.
No, okay, I disagree with that. Ideal for me is the prototypical example where there's two levels of contributors. And I think that's a model I still believe in strongly. Like crowdsource contributions, but free-form, and then progressive formalization by curators. Up to a point, I think Society Library wouldn't mind a two-tier.
When you say by curators, you mean there's a special class of user?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And they're also contributors, but there's the kind of no training contributor, and there's a highly trained curator, which is also a contributor. I think that's actually a scenario we'll have a lot.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant though by you know, there's so many possibilities of how many kinds of actors you can have. You can have a complex permission system or whatever, but I don't know if we want to record that in here or capture that here, as opposed to just saying, well, there's progressive formalization, which implies that you have different skill levels or different, you know.
But that's what I'm saying. Like some tools distinguish skill levels and some don't. Some tools allow unstructured contributions and some don't. Some tools allow modifying unstructured contributions and some don't. That is elsewhere. That's more a feature. But the fact that is the tool only open to people who understand the system and will enter contributions according to the problem domain ontology. or does it allow contributions from people who do not understand a specific problem domain ontology? I mean, that's really my question.
Right, and yeah, and this is why I kept my mouth shut during all of the last meeting. Is, you know, when I've done package selections before, like what you may have is a database of systems that's try to solve the same kind of problem, and so you filter on that, and then you get what's more of a qualitative assessment of the important variations, where, you know, because for us to create an ontology of you know, is it open to all users, or is it permissioned? Is it permissioned on contribution, or permissioned on reading? Is it permissioned on is there a publishing scheme where you have multiple layers of publishing, or is it not? Is it structured so you have curators or not? It gets, the complexity is infinite. And it once you filtered it down to a subset of systems, what you just want to do is read about each one, how they do it, and go, oh, that sounds kind of what so-and-so was looking for, right? You know, and maybe you read about a dozen different systems and find one that gets close.
I just want to discussion permissions. Oh, yeah, sure. Discussion settings. So here's what ideal Loom, the permission system, looks like. I have permissions per role and permissions per idea state in the CMS state. It's ridiculous. It's not usable, to be honest. But it's a toolkit for me, who understand the system, to create a certain community dynamic. I can say, okay, you want this community dynamic, this is how I would engineer it. I would never want to document this, but.
And is it, you know, is it permissioned by role, or is it permissioned by group of users? Is this for a community and it's permissioned that way, or is it permissioned by who has special powers? Or, you know, is it maybe like Idealoom, where, or I'm not sure if this is how you do it, but it's like the workflow is configurable. So it's meta permissions, where you set up permissions for a specific workflow.
Yeah.
And, you know, so
exactly.
Again,
I went deep in that, down that rabbit hole. The permission system in Idealoom is actually astonishingly complex, because I wanted to have a complex permission system. Would I do that again? I don't know, but there is a virtue to it. If you're thinking precisely about
well, you want to set up community. You want each community to be able to set up their own kind of governance, right?
That's one thing. But the other thing is, I want to identify people who understand this bit of methodology and hence are empowered to apply this action, whereas others need to first demonstrate that they understand this methodology before it gets applied. Like, ideally, there should be more, and this is where, if I do this again, instead of permission, it would be more, okay, I want to apply this bit of methodology, so it would be, you wouldn't be forbidden to do it, but it would have a kind of tentative newbie marking, and then you'd get reviewed by somebody who understands the process, who is known to understand the process, and you'd get sponsored as a kind of mentorship, and until you demonstrate ability to use that methodology, and then it's just assumed correct. But it's not the same as permission. It's more level of expertise with this methodology. And has it been validated by a peer? It's different logic, but yeah. It requires making certain moves explicit. That's something I want for SenseCraft, right? I want people say, okay, now I'm going to make a new criticism. Are you referencing your criticism correctly? Blah, 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 and have a kind of wizard. Are you doing the action of, I want to combine two ideas again. Are you doing properly with proper attribution, blah, blah, blah.
Hold on a second, I'm getting a call here.
Yeah.
Back.
So anyway, the bit unrelated, but where was I? Yeah, anyway, does that fit in the CI features and goal? Maybe, I don't know. The fact that I can design workflows is an important feature. And I think I'll add it in the feature because thank you for reminding me. The tutorial is probably general on a lot of features. Forget that specific. Actually, let me make that into a generic thing. And there's a whole community management. What's the onboarding process? Anyway, if we look like so many features of a complex system, whether it's a CMS, like a document-oriented CMS or a concept-oriented CMS, because really that's what we're doing, right? We're doing a concept-oriented content management system. So many CMS features are part of a concept topic, I'll call it TMS, topic management system, or claim management system, but that's also a C. I want to a non-C because CMS. Statement management system, yeah, I'll call it TMS. I think it's good. But collective intelligence, right? But the tools for thought are not collective intelligence, and we're still putting them in the broad category of what we're trying to catalog. Because
yeah, it's more like sense making rather than collective intelligence, but yeah.
Really, it's knowledge management. Yeah, let's call it knowledge management. I think it's broad enough. And what we're doing does fall in the broad knowledge management purview. I don't know if you're okay with that. Yes, no, maybe.
You know, it depends on the purpose of labeling it as such. Like I wouldn't, if you're looking for knowledge management tools for your company, I don't think we need to show up, but
why not? what's the purpose of a knowledge management tool in a company? It's to be able to, there's the knowledge repository aspect. Like if you want to take a decision, what's the past expertise and best knowledge?
Well, I mean,
but
it's
also
closer
take
to
future
decision support
decisions.
systems.
Decision
It's
support.
closer to decision support, right?
Exactly. And I think what we're doing is totally relevant to decision support, like going through the arguments, the pros and cons. So yeah, I think if a company, if we build our respective dreams, either or both, and we should be able to come to a company who asks for a knowledge management system. For me, it's in scope. It's actually, how do we finance this? It's one of the answers. It's another reason I'm thinking federation. Not a top reason, but it's a reason, right? So the real question is, what's the basic unit of knowledge, right? Because as I said, any CMS feature, and let me add that because I think that's note KM is a special case of CMS, both understood in broadest sense. All CMS features are applicable. And I mean that seriously. It's so, but what's the basic, like CMS is about documents. Here we're speaking about knowledge. What's the unit of knowledge? Is it a text document, as in wikis? Is it small text units, you know, like in outliners? Or is it structured data? Is it small text unit organized by containment, as in outlines plus transclusion, as in Rome, and links, as in a knowledge graph? So this is basically what we have. Or is it the same thing with data units? And here I'm assuming that data units is organized by links, because it makes no sense otherwise. Because each fields can be links, right? Now,
what is transclusion? It's reusability. What is
it's transclusion is a hypertext term from Engelbart and Nelson even more. But basically it's about saying, for example, if you can have a piece of text that's defined somewhere and displayed elsewhere. Now, in the case of outlines, because I'm speaking about outlines, and this is a case with Rome, you can have in an outline, you can refer to someplace else in the outline, and it's as if it were here, but it's an alias. It's functionally equivalent. It's not just copy paste because it's live. If you edit the source, the transcluded bit gets modified. So that's the difference between copy paste and transclusion, but it's usable in place. And that's again a difference between transclusion and just reference. And in an outline, you can actually open it in its secondary space, or at least jump to the original, but you have a good view of a lot of data at the transclusion site. What I'm saying is strict tree with aliases, full graph. It's the progression. The data entry process is here really. Posts, no deduplication, units of text or data units, curated, there's deduplication, maybe structured, and progressive formalization, there's a process, transform and curated units. Are the units of knowledge typed? Is the type system closed or open? Are the links typed? What are the link anchors? This one's interesting because are we linking nodes. And in the case of hypertext, for example, HTML jump links, we have from a text run to a unit. It's this case. So basically, can we go within a unit when in a link? In the origin, in the destination, in both? Or are links mediated by concepts? Like most links in Wikipedia, it's not a page link, it's the words represent a concept, the phrase represents a concept, and that could lead to the page. But if the page is renamed, it may go to a new page with that name, or it may go to a disambiguation page. That's case 6. But the idea is the concept is the substance of the link much more. It's not a direct unit to unit, it's through a concept. That's a very special case. What other information is there on units? Provenance, history, tags, reactions. That wasn't there before. Do we have access to backlinks? That kind of stuff. How is it visualized? Like this is more, before it was more the nature of the knowledge. It could have a certain nature and be visualized in multiple ways. So that's from the article, Linear Threaded Graph Container Matrix. And the visualization scales. There's a lot of them. Maybe I should simplify, but that's about the same. There's a lot of stuff I had everywhere, which I put into decision support. Is there voting? Is there voting with multi-criterion tokens, weighted by reputation, weighted by argumentation, closed option, open options, like can you modify the set of options during the vote? Argumentation support, is there a notion of argumentation links, relevance, explicit distinction between causal, epistemic, deontic, deontic, axiologic, really. Deontic is what should we do, and axiologic is what's good. Facilitation support. And that's almost CMS, right? I put deduplication there, but it's maybe something else. Maybe it's something. What is automated reasoning used for? And again, this is something, I'm not sure this one's complete. But I think what do people use automated reasoning for is extremely interesting. Oh, actually, I should have entity detection. Okay, I think this is it. The goals hasn't moved. It's really the above that I've tried to, like, it was a bit all over the place. I've tried to make it more unified and more thematically organized. Like a lot of voting stuff was all over the place in the previous version. I've tried to distinguish argumentation support and decision support. I mean, you can rely on argumentation support for decision, but decision is voting, right? Form of voting.
Yeah, voting is a form of decision. I don't know if there's decision support that is not voting. I mean, there's executive decisions, but
of course you can decide without voting. Then it's unsupported decision up to a point.
Sort of. I mean, there's like I was just reading about, the Maker DAO and other DAOs, some of their approaches. And the Maker DAO allows everybody to vote on proposals, but the vote is non-binding. It's sort of like an opinion poll. And now
Right.
that we've taken your opinions, we, the executive team, are going to make our decision, right? Yeah. But whatever.
I agree that, well, I still think that counts as decision support in the sense that I'm not.
It does. I'm just wondering if, like, I wouldn't know how to necessarily classify that one, and I'm just wondering if there is decision support that isn't voting. It's kind of a pointless question. It's a philosophical question rather than helping us here. But
Yeah, the meeting will end in a minute. We just have to reconnect to the same thing afterwards. I think that in a way, argumentation support is decision support, but I wanted to separate it. But here it's, yeah, I really think that voting is a lot of decision support ends up being voting related or argumentation related. But since I have argumentation support as a category, I thought I had taken out the other case. But yes, obviously the question is there, what is special about smart contracts is that the decision support is automatic and enforced in some cases. And that is quite unique. But for me, that's a separate issue. We're getting out of the pure knowledge management.
isn't that like automated reasoning, sort of?
Unmute. I don't think it's the same as automated reasoning as such, in the sense, the fact, like it's based, for me, aggregates are not automated reasoning. And the fact that an action is taken as a result of some aggregation method doesn't quite qualify as automated reasoning. But I mean, these are very subtle distinctions.
One second, I'm hearing you, but I'll be right back.
Okay, waiting. Anyway, oops, we're not sharing. I'm not sharing anymore. That.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, at some point, you know, any logic path in code is a decision and is AI as well, but it's not useful to talk about everything as such. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and the question of smart contracts for me is out of scope. Maybe it shouldn't be, because certainly DAOs are a form of collective action and collective thinking, and anything that supports, like for example, okay, let's talk a bit about this.
I mean, but like there's a whole category which is like governance tools. Isn't that like a decision support type tool?
Which it is, absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. What's special about DAOs is that the result of the vote is technically binding in some cases. In some cases, meaning when there's money involved, and the cryptocurrency can be allocated accordingly. So at least some things are legally binding, and we don't have smart contracts connected to the Internet of Things yet, which I'm grateful given the track record of smart contract hacking. But so there's no question that the whole, let's take the result of the collective process into action. Okay, let me add this as a parallel thing. Is the vote
Yeah.
A lot of my of these categories, they're kind of thematic, and I should be more explicit. Like this one is a multiple choice, but this would be a separate Boolean.
Yeah,
And
it's a checkbox or whatever, but yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, example smart contracts, but it's just a sort of thing that does the vote automatically trigger actions, or is there still like a human intermediation before an action is taken?
yeah. And what you were saying about something like this DAO community is that the answer is no. The vote is only indicative, but
Right.
that's a social choice. It's not a, well, I don't know if their tool would allow it otherwise. Is that?
It's not built into the way the DAO is built, is that there is the voting mechanism, but it's built to not trigger the actions. It's built to, I think there is a trigger. I think the trigger is, if it's not approved, in other words, the community can pre-veto something or something. It's like by voting yes on something, it becomes available for executive action to approve it. Otherwise, I don't think they can necessarily do it. But I don't know the details. There is some small.
No, my question was, does the DAO technology they choose allow smart contracts? Was it they don't have automatic action because they didn't choose to do it, or they don't have automatic action?
It was a conscious choice of governance to.
But the technology would have allowed it.
Yeah, it would have allowed it. Yeah.
I think it's the right choice. Certainly don't believe in smart contracts much. That's me.
Is that a technology thing, or you don't believe in automatically triggering without human executive decision?
More the latter. I think there are cases where it's justified. I mean, that's all servo mechanisms allow that. And I think it's partly a technology. It's just that the way smart contracts work, they're extremely susceptible to positive feedback loops and domino effects. And I'm extremely in favor of automation for negative feedback loops, and extremely leery of it for whenever there's a possibility of positive feedback loops. I think this is my generic statement. And I found smart contracts to be prone to positive feedback loops.
Yeah, what's interesting is this, that mirrors the elitist and bizarre design of the US Constitution, right? The US system.
Oh, interesting.
The US Constitution, our weird electoral system is all, and the 2 senators per state versus the popular House, right, of Representatives, was all structured to provide an escape valve for pure democracy, because they didn't trust putting it into the hands of the average person, all decisions. They just didn't trust it. And so they built the mechanism so that elites could override, basically.
Yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with negative versus positive feedback loops, though.
No, it's more about mistrust of the masses, right?
Yep.
Which is, in terms of, well, no. Anyway, we're off subject, so.
it's no, but it's an yes, but it's an interesting conversation.
Yeah. I mean, what I was gonna say, so the one difference is like they were afraid of
there was
the masses, and my bigger fear with smart contracts is afraid of bugs in the system and oligarchs, and somebody just kind of, you know, it's kind of like what do you call it, hostile takeover type situations. Yeah.
Well, I mean, as I said, hacking of smart contracts has a pretty dire track record. And it shows that the takeover is all too easy at this point. May or may not change, but takeover is ridiculously easy. But here it's interesting because is it the smart contract that makes it dangerous? Is it the automation? Or is it just the fact that the assets are under control of the API? Though I guess it is the smart contract that's used to manipulate the API, not the API directly. So,
well, yeah. Okay, but what's inherent in the danger of specifically smart contracts is it's a machine you can't shut off, and you can't change the rules mid-flight. So if you didn't think ahead enough, and that's why most, you know, governance type contracts trying to build in now escape valves of shut off, right? Shut off, let's figure out what's going on before we let it continue, right? Upgradability, you know, learn from your past mistakes to
acknowledge limited human cognition. Those contracts are designed by limited humans. We can't predict. Prediction is hard, especially the future and all that. And
but yeah, the main feature is it cannot be shut off or stopped without, you know, a majority of the audience, and not just the smart contract audience, the majority of the blockchain audience agreeing it should be done, right? The original DAO is a rare example.
Yeah, it's a kind of, we don't need no stinking judicial oversight. And that's an incredible design flaw, yes. I'm, as you know, not a fan of the whole. There is, and it's sad because there's so much in the distributed web that I think is of enormous value, and so much that the cryptocurrency has made actually quite terrible. And I kind of understand the dream of the DAO, kind of, but not sure that cryptocurrency was the best way to do that. But that's not our story. Maybe it is, I don't know.
I think it's interesting to watch the progress and lessons being learned. I think that's what's really interesting, is I do think there's a direction for that, right?
But at tremendous
starts
cost,
at extremely, right? Well, to the people who are
who got scammed and who lost all their life savings. And I mean, you are reading Web3 is going great, right?
I know about it. I'm not.
It's worth reading.
Reading everything, yeah.
It's worth reading, and it's worth reading.
I don't have time, but I do. I hear a lot of the stories anyway, but yeah.
Yeah, it's just the Web3 is going great. Is just the kind of a feed of horror stories that's more or less useful, but I find her essays extremely interesting. She had a great essay on the perils of this self-sovereign identity. And there I'm a bit more, I think there's tremendous value to self-sovereign identity. And for me, self-sovereign identity is one of the actual good use cases of the ledger, of the blockchain. Pledges, like in a good public decision system, what you want to do is to be able to do pledges, a bit like the Kickstarter, saying if everybody agrees to this, I pledge this much money, energy, resources, whatever. That's great. And that's a kind of smart
Right.
contract up to a point. But at least the non-reputability aspect is extremely important. And that, again, yay, ledgers are useful and distributed ledgers are useful. I just think the cryptocurrency was a terrible, terrible, terrible application of the ledger. But that's me again. And there, I think GDPR went a bit overboard. We're not talking about this at all. Though it is about public decisions, right? Collective decisions. What are the mechanisms? In that GDPR is very, very unclear about how to interact with blockchain. There's been a few articles, but in terms of binding judiciary decisions, it can be interpreted this way or that. But I mean, the whole point of a pledge is you have access to someone's public identity for the sake of the pledge. Now, if you have a public identity, in theory, it should be erasable by GDPR.
Right.
How do you pledge them?
Yeah.
That's on its face ridiculous, but the exceptions are not well written. That's me being a bit of a stickler to what does the law say in this case, which few people are.
Well, the law is incompatible. This is incompatible with the reality of blockchain.
Yeah. Anyway, but I find it difficult that so much of self-sovereign identity is optimized for these pseudonymous identities and has nothing to say about real identity. Like the only, I was looking at systems that try to tie your identity with, your identity as a person. Even the stupid soulbound tokens article, it's still pseudonymous identity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not, there's a lot of great thinking in there, but if we're talking about collective decisions, we want, Sybil attacks are a problem. Yeah, they're a problem if everybody's using pseudonymous identity.
Right. Exactly
and I understand we want anonymous votes, but that's a difference.
We want anonymous, but one vote per human.
Exactly.
Voting, right?
Exactly.
How do we get that? And so basically all current blockchain governance systems through one vote per human out the door.
Exactly.
And they say, let your tokens talk, right? People are going to distort it anyway. Let's just make them do it in a way that valuates the token. Yeah.
As you said, that at some point it's a tool for building oligarchies.
Right. And I thought of an interesting argument. Nobody's made this argument to me, but I haven't been talking to people enough. I'm sure somebody would have made this argument to me. This would be the argument I would make if I were Democracy Earth, to the question I never got to ask them directly, which is, you're creating an oligarchy. I thought you wanted one vote per person. How are you doing the vote token like this? What they do is, with your vote token, you get to vote as many times as tokens you have, but they've created a UBI system where they drip tokens to every member equally, and then you with money can buy more tokens, and it's like, well, you're literally buying votes then, right? And the argument that I would make to that complaint back, right, would be, this is the way it already works in real life. we're making it more explicit. We're trying to make it more equitable and obvious by, letting you see who voted, by giving everybody a universal basic income in terms of voting power, enough to keep them involved, and that's what we can do. That's the only argument that I think you can make is, well, life already works this way. We're just making it explicit, right? Which isn't much consolation.
And it's not even,
Yeah.
I mean, when you say life already works this way, I mean, life's being sabotaged to work this way in certain domains, but it's not worked that way everywhere, right? We've had functional democracies before. We still have them in places. The Citizens United is very specific to the US. The explicit vote buying is very specific to the US. I mean, and that was the argument for anonymous vote.
I have to go to a meeting.
Okay,
Oops, hold on.
sorry, we
yeah.
diverged so much anyway.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Great conversation. Ciao, ciao.
Yeah.